some technicalities here with the IT. It's now 1 minute past 6, so I'd like to start the meeting of the Lower Thames Crossing Task Force. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be recorded and live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. I would also like to remind Task Force members and officers, both in the chamber and on Teams, to only switch on their microphone when invited to speak and to switch it off or mute it when you're finished talking. With apologies for absence, I have received an apology via email for Councillor John Allen, and I'm sure there'll probably be a few more due to a rather serious traffic accident on a nearby road. Now move to agenda item 2, the minutes. I move that the minutes of the Lower Thames Crossing Task Force meeting held on the 20th of July 2020 to be approved as a correct record. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? Okay, got an indication that there's no one in the chamber and no one on Teams, so those minutes have been accepted. Item 4, declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare a declaration of interest? Okay, again, no declaration of interests. Moving on to agenda item 5. It's good to have Highways England in attendance with us via Microsoft Teams, and they're going to be speaking to us on matters of Lower Thames Task Force.
Yep, thanks. Sam, are you able to share the presentation? Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, and click on. Yeah, let me start by saying, obviously, again, thanks for the opportunity to come and meet with yourselves. I know Anna was saying that we had a bit of a torrid time last time, but it is genuinely a good opportunity to come in to meet, so you can, as much as we can share, you can understand where we're moving, and obviously we can meet with you, listen to what you say, note your concerns, and see what we can do with them. Obviously, that's against a backdrop of we accept your general position on the scheme, and the fact you're not wholly supportive of it. But again, thanks for the opportunity to come in and present. If we can do it the same that we did it last time, in terms of we'd run through the presentation, and then if we could take questions and answers at the end, that would be great.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick recap from the in terms of the PINS process. We shared this last time. And again, this isn't our slide. We've taken it straight from the PINS website. And the intent is to show that we're looking to submit our DCO application towards the end of October. We're currently reviewing the design refinement consultation and the feedback that's come there. Obviously, we need to complete that exercise first and make whatever changes we need to make before we can submit. If things we're able to take everything on board, which we will do in the correct format, then we'll look to publish our DCO in late October. Just to reiterate, this isn't the final piece. Very far from it. We submit it there. It then needs to be accepted by PINS. They have 28 days to review what we've submitted, see whether we've complied with the required standards, so that if that's the case, then in 28 days' time, they'll confirm that the application has been accepted. We then go into a pre-examination phase. Will be the opportunity for yourselves to put your case forward, and then the examination. And really, in the pre-examination and examination phase, that's where, obviously, as I said last time, we'll be challenged to give the explanation in terms of how we have the scheme that we have, and how we've developed that preferred route to the scheme that we now have, and also to set out our assessment of the impacts that scheme has, both during construction and during the operation, so that then both the cases for and against can be made. And certainly during that period, there will be times where we will agree to commit to certain things over and above what is currently in the DCO, subject to obviously the necessary governance around that process. We then move to a decision period where the planning inspectorate will make their recommendation to the minister, and then the minister will make their decision reviewing what the planning inspectorate has said following the examining authority. And then obviously once the decision there, post-decision, there's also an opportunity for legal challenge if obviously somebody feels that the scheme hasn't followed due process. So that's a quick summary of the DCO process. Again, it's just to show that although we have a freeze on this scheme now, and it's what we're submitting effectively our planning application for, there's a lot of work to go through before we get to a decision in terms of whether the scheme proceeds or not. Thanks, Sam. Just to recap, I know the presentation I gave last time was on the design refinement consultation, but just to give you a recap, there was a reduction to the overall size of the development boundary. What we would believe that to be quite significant, obviously, for those who are still directly affected, it still is a significant impact. There were minor changes to the highway design. There were some minor changes to the alignment, some minor changes to some of the merge types, just to cater for higher increase in traffic volumes. We moved a bridge a couple of meters. So they were what we would deem relatively minor highway changes. We'd obviously worked through our pedestrian, cyclists and horse riders sort of stage 3 detailed design. And so again, we presented the picture of that. In the statutory consultation and the supplementary consultation, certainly the supplementary consultation, there was a large number of utility diversions that were shown that were options because the utilities hadn't completed their design in enough detail to enable us to confirm which option we were proceeding with. In decon, that wasn't the case. They had gone further. They'd completed their design work. So as a result, we contained fewer utility diversions in the design refinement consultation. And we'd also been developing our landscape proposals. And so that was presented as we nearing completion of our what we call our environmental master plan. So we shared our landscaping proposals. And there was the further developed ecological mitigation measures that was shared as part of the design refinement consultation. So that's a quick summary. Obviously, because of the COVID situation, which continues to put pressure on us. Sorry, next slide, please, Sam. Obviously, because of the COVID situation, we didn't have any in-person consultation events. We adopted a digital-first approach to consultation with postal and telephone facilities. And unfortunately, we got deposit locations and information points, but depending on government guidelines, most of those were unfortunately closed. I think only one was open. And I can confirm which one it was outside this forum. So that was, certainly a significant impact that COVID played, and we've pushed on with the best guidelines, trying to share the information in the most open way. And certainly from our perspective, the digital consultation and the interactive maps did work well and did have a high number of hits and were viewed a number of times. Okay, thanks, Sam. I mentioned in one of the earlier slides that we did reduce our design refinement consultation boundary. It was down by 12.5%. And the number of properties impacted was reduced by 45%. And the table, again, you've seen this last time, but just to recap, you got the design refinement consultation. We had 22.9 square kilometres, give or take. At supplementary consultation, that was 26.2 square kilometres. And again, the number of properties were affected reduced from 270 to 150. Again, if you're one of those properties, because we reduced that number, I'm not looking to play down or dismiss the impact that it has on those properties and residential businesses. And the overhead lines reduced from 70 at overheads out of 150 diversions, whereas a supplementary consultation with 190 out of 270. And the properties require demolition. Again, if you're one of those properties, it's an impact on yourselves. But for a scheme of this size, complexity, and length, we've pushed hard to try and get that number as low as we can. Okay, thanks, Sam. We were asked in terms of when we looked to talk, putting the agenda together to talk about some of the noise barriers, the locations and where they are. And certainly last time that there was, I think we were questioned in terms of what a noise barrier looks like. We've taken a Highways England stock image of a typical noise barrier. It's generally as you can see there, a wood panelled fence. It doesn't need to be. Certainly, I know now that there's products on the market which are recycled plastic, and really it's left to the contractor to design the detail of the noise barrier. So the height and location, once they've completed their detailed design, they'll refine what we've got in terms of our environmental statement. They'll assess against that to make sure they've complied with everything that we put in there. But the actual design of the barrier itself then is down to the contractor in terms of what material they prefer and its location. It could be, it could be as is shown here. This is a standard timber. As I said, it could be a typical sort of recycled plastic, or even they may choose to use if they have room, they could certainly look to use earth bunds as well. So that's hopefully shows a typical barrier. And then if we move on to the next slide, we'll be able to show the locations there. So you can see we've highlighted, this is an extract from the design refinement consultation. What we've done, we've modified it slightly. You can see the yellow box there, which shows where the noise barriers are going to go. And then so if you look, and then we've highlighted the diagram as well. So number 10 is a noise barrier approximately 2 meters high by less than 200 meters long. Number 11 and 12, this is a noise barrier 1 meter high, less than 700 meters long. And number 13 there is a noise barrier 2 meters high by less than 250 meters long. So they're pretty what I would call sort of standard height noise barriers. Generally, certainly the schemes I've worked on, we've tended to use the simple wooden post and wooden sort of fence insert up to 4 meters high. So 1 to 2 meters, you'd expect it to look like it was shown on that stock image we shared. If we move on to the again similar format, we've taken what we had in the design refinement consultation, we've modified it slightly just to focus on the noise barriers there. Number 11 and 12 are approximately 1 meter high by 1,500 meters long. 13 is a 1 meter high barrier by about 550 meters long. 14 again, 2 meter high barrier, less than 500 meters long. Number 15 is a noise barrier 2 meters high and around sort of 400 meters long. And 16 again is 2 meters high with 500 meters long. And 17 is a noise barrier 2 meters high and 300 meters long. And the number 18, which is the one shown just at the bottom there, is a noise barrier approximately 6 meters high and less than 150 meters long. So that's giving you the sort of general location and the detail of the height of the barriers. And again, one of the questions we were asked in terms of the 6 meter high barrier. So if we move on to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Actually, it's on the one after this. Again, this is just showing 11 and 12 there. You got a 2 metre high and 1 metre high barrier. One's 200 metres long. So 12 it is, not 11. 12 is a noise barrier. And then 13 and 14 are the ones that tie into the other ones, which are barriers 1 metre high by approximately 1,500 metres long. And if we move on to the next one. Sorry, this was the one. We were asked to give an indication of what a 6 metre high noise barrier looks like. Obviously, we weren't going to go into absolute detail here at a private location, but we give an indication. The topography is much sorry, the landform, so the shape of the road, the cross section we've taken there is how we would look. We've shown at the bottom there, you can see a 6 metre high barrier. We've also shown just for scale what a 2 metre and 1 metre high barrier would look like. And generally with 6 metre high, again, these are bespoke barriers, very much dependent upon the ground conditions. That may be, again, it may be timber with timber infill. It could be a metal post with timber infill, or as I said, recycled plastic. But again, it's up to the contractor to give the detailed design so that the performance and function of the barrier meets the requirements that we've set out in the environmental impact in terms of the noise impact on the properties there. So if we can move on, Sam, please. Again, one of the other ways in which we're looking for mitigation, both some of this is for noise mitigation, some is in terms of landscape mitigation, is what we call a false cut-in. And so what we've shown here really is that obviously you've got the Lower Thames Crossing Road through the middle there. Again, that's just a typical section. Don't look at the number of lanes there. It's more showing the detail in terms of what a false cut-in is. So a false cut-in is effectively an earth mound on either side of the road that gives gives the impression that the road is in cut-in when it needn't be. And again, this is pretty complex, but it shows where the false cut-ins are. So it's starting from the top. You've got a false cut-in 2 metres above Lower Thames Crossing. There's a false cut-in moving down in 4 metres above the slip road. Another false cut-in 2 metres above the slip road. False cut-in 4 metres above. Another false cut-in 4 metres above. And it is generally, a number of them are 4 metres above the Lower Thames Crossing. So that means the top of the band is 4 metres above. So top of that false cut-in is 4 metres above the verge level of Lower Thames Crossing. And so you can see most on these are 4 metres or so. And again, on this one, there's a 5 metre false cut-in, then a 4 metre false cut-in, 2 metres, 2 metres, and 2 metres. So there's quite a substantial length of false cut-ins on this particular location. Again, we thought it'd be worth sharing the compound locations that was at supplementary consultation, and these haven't changed. And talking you through the key there, you can see the pink compounds are what we call secondary construction sites. So they tend to be the smaller, what we would call a satellite office from the main works. So the sort of orangey yellow blocks, they are the main construction sites. And obviously these have all been assessed in our environmental statement. We got a number of changes there. So one has not changed in the statutory consultation. Two, the compound at number 2 there, that's been reshaped to avoid an archaeological site. 3, we've revised for more efficient design requiring less land. And these 3 sites close to the A13 have been refined following design feedback from statutory consultation to reduce the impact on nearby properties. So there's been some change at A, but predominantly, the one at the north tunnel entrance is the main construction site for the tunnel. and then the roads are the ones by the A13 and the M25, with satellite compounds placed accordingly to service the contractor's needs. Thanks, Sam. We were questioned or asked to put in something about the lakeside compound, and we thought we'd share this. The lakeside compound is currently the perfect circle contractor's compound to enable the ground investigation and the archaeological trial trenching works to proceed. We're aware the site owner has submitted a planning application to Thurrock to regularise the use of the site, and currently Highways England's spatial planning team is to give formal comments to Thurrock in the usual way. And to be clear, it is not intended that this site to be part of the main works, and as we've shown on the earlier slide, it will not form part of the DCO submission. We were asked to put in the supplementary consultation feedback. Now I can read through this. I don't mind, but I think there's 3 slides. Sam, is it?
That's correct. Yeah, 3 slides.
Yeah, there's 3 slides, and I'm happy. I can either read through it, or we can summarise it. There's numerous comments from yourselves that obviously we need to review and respond on. If we leave it as that, or I can go through each one.
Sorry to interject. For us in the chamber, it's quite hard to see the text. So if you could maybe give us the whistle-stop tour verbally, that would really help us in the chamber. Okay.
What I'll do, so I don't paraphrase and wrongly summarise one, I'll probably read them out word for word, if that's okay. So the first one we've got there is the proposed LTC does not meet several of the National and Highways England strategic policy tests, such as option testing, delivery/facilitation of economic growth, and achieving sustainable local growth and scheme objectives. The next one is the assessments presented by Highways England to date do not give adequate consultation to the NPPF. The proposed LTC does not make provision for and is inconsistent with the housing and development potential for Thurrock and the aspirations for the borough and for the wider South Essex area. Limited amount of meaningful technical engagement which has taken place to date, the adequacy of the consultation and matters relating to DCO requirements. This remains a considerable concern to the Council, especially covering scheme design and configuration, ongoing technical assessment work and traffic modelling. Next one is design information is not clearly communicated, lacks a comparative perspective and does not sufficiently integrate with landscape features and engineering topographies. And the next one is significant information gaps and the potential for underreporting potential impacts. There is a need for new scoping exercise, potential adverse effects on air quality, noise, health, severance, and natural/historic environmental scheme. And then the next slide is the relocation site for the traveller community has not been adequately taken into account, and that the option proposed by Highways England is not a viable solution. The scheme would have significant economic costs on residents and businesses in the borough, principally due to the direct loss of land, disruption to access and movement in the borough, and the creation of blight across the LTC corridor. The importance of ensuring a lasting beneficial legacy is highlighted, covering community infrastructure, environment, health and well-being, and opportunities for local employment, apprenticeships and training programmes. Next one is several concerns relating to the configuration of the proposed LTC, for example, at the interchange between LTC and A13, in the reduction of number of lanes southbound from the M25, and more generally in relation to facilitating future local growth. Future work is necessary on the configuration of the interchange between the proposed LTC and the A13. Next one is there's a lack of detailed information such as mitigation on HEQIA impacts, insufficient consideration given to assessing key pollutants, PM 2.5, as recommended by WHO, with known health effects. Council hasn't seen details of the key docs, such as the code of construction practice yet. No detail. Oh, sorry, next one, Sam, please. No detail is given as to what will be provided by way of mitigation or the measures that are improving and upgrading facilities for walking, cycling or horse riding. Alternative design options for the treatment of the viaduct over the Tilbury Loop line should be considered to reduce potential adverse environmental effects. Alternative design options for the treatment and crossing through the Mardyke Valley should be considered to reduce potential adverse environmental effects. Several concerns relating to the extent of land take proposed for the utility works and the direct impact on residential premises and historic features. The land take shown for utility works should be rationalised to the minimum possible area required. SUPCON does not include the results of any option testing and is insufficient detail to understand the impacts of the supplementary consultation scheme on the local road networks as well as residents, businesses, open countryside and designated environmental areas in the borough. The information presented by Highways England to date does not give adequate detail of its strategy for and potential effects of accommodating and managing the construction workforce. The Council has yet to see and agree a list of potential cumulative schemes with Highways England. And it is unclear how the delivery of the other likely developments such as the Tilbury Link Road, highlighted in the Government's Road Investment Strategy 2, 2020 to 2025, RIS 2, Department for Transport, March 2020, as a RIS 3 pipeline scheme will be coordinated with the timing of the delivery of Lower Thames Crossing. Excuse me one sec. Then the next slide is the feedback we've got on the design refinement consultation, and it's the reiteration of significant concerns so far raised at STATCON and SUBCON, including LTC programme, technical engagement and issues around adequacy of consultation, emerging local plan and its interface with LTC, design quality, highways design and safety, DCO application boundary, LTC scheme and EIA scope, and specific comments on decon such as the environmental impact of each change, the need for details around mitigation and documents such as the Code of Construction Practice, COCP, potential effects on people, communities, residents and businesses, mitigation proposals, noise barriers, landscape and ecological mitigation, and design refinements to the NMU network, utilities diversions and transport modelling. So I think it's fair to say, I made my comment earlier in terms of, we have a good understanding of where the authorities, the members' position is on the scheme, and it's recognised that obviously we'll need to respond accordingly. Is it now worth opening to questions and answers, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm sure there'll be some questions from around in the chamber and online. What I'll do, if I take questions first from inside the chamber, and then we'll move to members online. Councillor
Hello there. I did bring this subject up of the Travellers site in Blackshots, Grays. Could you clarify if this site's going to be made bigger at all for more travellers to join the site at all?
Yeah, I can answer that. The site, when you say is the site going to be made bigger for more travellers, no, it isn't intended that the site is increased to increase the residential area for the travellers, but in terms of the location of the site, more land is certainly required because work is required to provide environmental mitigation around those travellers.
So, in other words, the amount of travellers are going to stay the same, what's there at the moment?
Certainly, it isn't the intent. I can't comment on the precise number of travellers, but certainly the number of pitches that are there and what's currently there, my understanding is that's going to remain the same, yes.
Councillor Shinnick, I can answer your question. There's 21 pitches on the existing site at Gammon Fields. There's going to be 21 pitches re-provided. The area of the site to be re-provided is bigger in terms of its footprint, partly because of the reasons Gareth mentioned, which is to do with mitigation, but also because the existing site layouts don't meet current guidelines with regard to fire safety. So that's why this sites need to be provided slightly bigger.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Question from resident representative Robert Quick.
Hi, it's in relation to the sound barriers again. Can you? You mentioned about wooden fences, one option. In this day and age, with all the noise-absorbing materials there are about for a variety of tasks, can you explain how you define the noise reduction requirement that your contractors will then need to meet?
Yep, certainly. We can answer that in a number of ways. Firstly, we would have assessed the material that's on the road in terms of what the noise generating impact is of that material, and we've gone for a thin surfacing, which obviously has a reduced noise when compared to like a hot rolled asphalt. So we've taken that into consideration, and so then there's a commitment that the contractor will need to adhere to what we put in terms of the environmental statement. And then the barriers themselves are not absorbive barriers, they're reflective. So it reflects the noise rather than absorbs it. And as I said, the contractor, once they complete their detailed design, will look at what we've reported in the environmental statement, and will, through a series of surveys, design their scheme so that it meets what we've set out in the environmental statement. And the type of material that they use is very much up to them, subject to obviously the specification around a noise barrier and approved products that can be used on Highways England's carriageway and verges.
If you're going for deflection, you must have a requirement for them to meet to see whether the material they use is deflecting sufficiently. I asked this question because locally on the Manor-way in Stamford-le-Hope, they have these wooden fences, and they in no way deflect the sound away from the houses nearby.
Again, I couldn't comment on something on another scheme, but certainly on the schemes that I've worked on, when we put these barriers in place, we've done pre and post noise monitoring to show that they've been effective, and it's a pretty well established means of reducing the impact of noise on houses and businesses.
Just one last point. At that last meeting, you spoke about the noise barriers there, and you mentioned in it that the longevity of the sound barriers was dependent on the access to them for maintenance. Are you taking that into account?
Certainly, I think the point I raised last time was somebody asked whether they could plant right up to the noise barrier in terms of landscape planting. And my response was that depending on the location of the barrier and how that barrier is erected and the material it's made from, then planting right up next to it needs to be considered in terms of the maintenance operation of maintaining the barriers. Because obviously you put it there, and depending on the material that you need, you do need to go and maintain these barriers.
Thank you. We're now going to move to members on Teams online. If you could please use the raise hand function of Microsoft Teams. I'll just... we'll start with questions from Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the subject of the noise barriers, I mean, obviously the one that you quoted that was marked 18 is 6 metres high, so that's huge, isn't it? Well, how will that impact on any residential properties nearby?
Yep, certainly there is one location where we have a 6 metre high barrier, which is giving noise protection to a number of residences. And in terms of the impact that's having on those residences, that's assessed in the environmental statement in terms of the landscape chapter.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, I mean, 6 meters. 6 meters is, well, I mean, I like to work in feet and inches. I'm still on old money, but I mean, that is like having a huge wall potentially in front of your
Councillor
property.
Darnley, it's the equivalent of a double decker and a half.
Right.
Yeah,
That helps.
Thank you.
yes, certainly on the slide we showed that it is 6 meters is what it says. It's a 6 meter high barrier that does provide noise protection, noise mitigation. But it isn't, I'm not going to stand here and say that it isn't a significant structure to have. And it depends, if it's behind someone's garage, there's less of an impact. It very much depends on where the house is, the outlook of the house on that barrier. But that will be considered as part of the environmental statement of the landscape chapter.
Right, okay. The other question I had was, what was the feedback from the design refinement consultation on the new travellers site? Because obviously there were a lot of objections to the first site that was suggested. So I just wondered if you had anything further from that consultation.
Certainly, at this moment in time, we're working through all the responses, and unfortunately, I'm not in a position to say, to confirm or otherwise whether there was a great deal of support or otherwise for, the comments I put up earlier were very much from Thurrock, as opposed to sort of general comments. So we're working through that now, but I'm not able to say in this forum what the overall response is.
Okay, thank you.
A question from Laura Blake.
Thank you. Couple of questions. Firstly, we know that you mentioned about the fault cutting being removed. Can I ask you to clarify that a little bit more? Because I'm still very confused after looking at Map Book 3, because it doesn't actually appear on Map Book 3 that it has been removed. I can't see where the change is in that. Could you provide me a little bit more information and explain that, please?
So that's a false cut-in on Map Book 3, did you say?
Yes, I can't see any difference between the supplementary consultation and the design consultation, whereas you've stated in Design Con that you've actually removed false cutting, but I can't see any removal of it in Map Book 3. I wondered if you could explain that to me, please.
Okay, and unless Gary knows, I think that's one we're going to have to take away and come back to you, if that's okay.
Okay, then moving on to the noise barriers. If I've understood correctly, you're saying that they will be reflective rather than absorptive?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah, in that case, my understanding of that just through the wording is that they will reflect the sound. So when you have something like a 6 metre barrier in place and that's reflecting it, and there's not something of the equivalent the other side, and you're aiming that towards highly populated residential areas, is that not considered to be a problem?
No, because we model everything. We create a noise model without the barriers in place first. Obviously, we run the noise model there, and we report in terms of what the impacts are in terms of increases of noise on properties. We then put what we call the mitigation in place. So we put the noise barriers in place. We then rerun the model, so that we would have rerun the model with our 6 metre barrier in place. And then what we're reporting on our environmental statement would be the impact of the, because what you're saying is with it being 6 metres high, it would reflect the sound across. It reflects it, but certainly in terms of, I won't go into details, but I think the impact of noise is exponential. So the further away you are, it reduces quite quickly. So I can confirm that our model and our noise model and our noise chapter in the environmental statement will report on what impacts there are, if any, on the properties opposite the 6 metre high barrier.
Is that something that, I appreciate you're saying it's going to be in the ES, but is that something on that particular location that you would be able to provide us with a before and after, without, because you said that you have that for other projects. It's something I have asked for, an example of what benefit the noise barrier does offer of a with and without it. And so far, no one's been able to provide that. Is that something that you could come back to us with, please?
Yes, I don't know whether we can provide it this side of publishing the environmental statement, but I can confirm that and certainly let you know. And if it is post our publishing of the environmental statement, I'll certainly share that with you.
Thank you.
Councillor Rice.
Yes, when the crossing comes across the Brentwood Road at Chapel St Mary, would it be possible to take it the route further west, away from the built-up areas? We've heard this evening you're going to put these false cut and cover areas in, but if it's taken away and you still put this false cut and cover areas in, it would obviously relieve the nuisance to the residents, both in Chapel St Mary and Dorset Heath. It might affect one or two other properties, but that's a small price to pay when you're talking about thousands of people.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Just to clarify, when I've said false cut, it's false cut only. It's not sort of false cut and cover. So there is no cover provision to that. It's just purely earthbound. So just wanted to clarify that, just in case I'd given the wrong impression. And in terms of the location that we have, obviously our scheme has been developed from, there was a lot of work in terms of the process that went into the selection of the preferred route. And then we've refined that preferred route in terms of what we think the most appropriate route is in terms of the overall engineering design of the scheme, and then the environmental impact, obviously locally and on residents. And so at this moment in time, we're content that we have the right alignment for the scheme, and rather than looking to change it.
Well, the only reason I raise it is because obviously, when it comes to the communities of Chapel St Mary and Dorset Heath, within parts of them, you're within 500 metres of housing development. Now, if you were to take your road and move it further west, you might get one or two casualties like a farm and an OAP pensioner area, a rest home. But those really are incidental when you're comparing thousands of people. And I would urge upon you to mitigate the problems you're going to inflict on the communities of Chapel St Mary and Dorset Heath, is that you actually move that further west so that you can actually take that strain away. Along with your measures of this, you call it cut and cover or whatever you call it, that will mitigate it to a degree, but it needs to go further west so that we can actually see a real benefit to the residents of those two communities.
Oh, okay, thank you, Councillor. If it would be okay, certainly outside this forum, I can share the reason why we've gone for the scheme that we've gone for. I can share that with everybody in the task force, and then once you've reviewed that, as I said earlier, we will be publishing our DCO application in October, and subject to that being accepted, then there'll be an opportunity for the authority and yourselves to put in representations in terms of whether you think it's on the right whether it's on the right alignment. So if you're not satisfied with the response we give you now, I would certainly bring that up as a representation with a view then that we would then need to give the reasoning as to the route that we have in the examination.
Well, once again, I only push you that the fact you have an opportunity now to move it further west and to alleviate the problems of these two communities. And if you were to do so, that would be a tremendous step forward, and perhaps you wouldn't get the objections you're going to get. It's about, trying to strike a balance. And if the balance is correct, then people will be more inclined to say, well, OK, we understand the scheme's got to come along. And in this case, the Highways England have listened to the communities. They're prepared to move it further west. If it goes through a farm, it's not the end of the world, because at the end of the day, one building, to destroy one building or two buildings is far less damage than to destroy thousands of people's lives, their whole environment, their whole way of existence. And I would just plead with you that you do look at this quite seriously so that we can take it forward and perhaps give some good news to the communities, these two communities, rather than bad news, because good news is always better for everyone.
Okay, Councillor, if outside this forum, if we could arrange a quick call with you so we can fully understand what it is that you think we could move, and then we'll pull our response together in terms of how we've got to where we've got to, and we could go from there. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Gareth, can I just ask, we are a matter of weeks away from submission, and what I would say to you is please don't raise members' expectations about what is possible in the time remaining, because for me, what you've just said is raising an expectation that you can do something about what Councillor Rice has raised, which is a perfectly valid consideration. But the reality is, actually, you're not going to do anything about it. You're just going to provide a response as to why it can't be done, rather than explain to members how it can be done. So let's just be clear about that, because let me just say, Highways England has raised expectations on several times of the members of the task force who have been bitterly disappointed by the responses. So you need to be really careful about how you answer what I've just said, please.
Anna, I will be really careful. And actually, if you'd have listened to everything that I'd said as opposed to picking up on selective parts of the text, it would have been pretty clear what I've said. What I said to the councillor was that we will give a reason as to why we've gone for the route that we've gone for, and during the period of the examination, there'll be an opportunity there for representations to be submitted if they're not content, if the councillor or the council's not content with what we've said. So there was never an understanding of we were going to do something which you've suggested. Firstly, by speaking to the councillor, it was to understand exactly the point that the council is looking to make, so there's no ambiguity there. And we will need to set out why we've come to the decision at this location. So yeah. There was no suggestion, and I made it pretty clear that we would follow due process through the examination.
Okay. So, Councillor Rice, if you're happy with that, it's an explanation of why they've made the decision they've made, not an explanation as to how they can accommodate what you want.
I do understand, but I would hope that they would actually try to accommodate the two communities. Otherwise, what they're going to face is thousands of people lining up at a public inquiry and blocking it up and delaying this scheme for years. Now, Highways England have it in their midst to actually be accommodating to the local authority and its members, or face the consequences when an outraged community says, right, we'll all turn up at a public inquiry and we'll block it. And then your scheme will lay in the dust. Now, either you want to move this forward in an amicable situation or you don't. And all I'm asking for is, as you go across the Brentwood Road at the bottom of Chadwell St Mary, you take the road further west. I don't think that's an unreasonable request, because what we're talking about is an open field. So it doesn't matter whether in Highways England you move it slightly west or you stay where it is, because at the end of the day, what you're talking about are people's lives. Why would you want to go between 200 and 500 metres of people's homes when you have the opportunity to mitigate this now and move the line further west? It might run through a farmhouse, which you're going to have to pay for, but at the end of the day, it's far cheaper and it would be far better for you in human relations rather than to press ahead with something that will affect communities, and then suddenly communities will have their backs up and delay your scheme even further. I mean, you talk about, you know, you're going to submit the DCSO, and the minister will kind of like roll over. But at the end of the day, if you're mindful to move it further west, away from the residential areas, I would have thought you'd strike the brownie points with the planning inspectorate, because at least then you'd have been seen to actually take on board local elected representatives' feelings of their communities, rather than just say, well, we'll give you the reasons why we can't do it. And really what we want this evening is we want you to move it further west. Because if you don't move it further west, you're going to have thousands of people line up at a public inquiry and give the reasons why it should go there.
And again, I didn't want to give the impression, if I've misled you in terms of we were going to change the scheme, apologies if that wasn't the case. But the simple fact is, we have to demonstrate the decisions that we've made, as I said, to get to the preferred route and to the scheme that we currently have are the right decisions, and we have the right scheme. So what I was trying to do was to share the reasoning behind the scheme that we will be promoting at the DCO. But at that examination, clearly, if there's a reason why that scheme isn't the best scheme, isn't appropriate, and there's a whole raft of things that you need to look at in terms of, you know, you've got environmental impacts, you've got the engineering alignments, so there's a raft of things that inform that design. So we will need to, you know, we'll need to share that with you either in that forum, but I'd prefer to share it with you now so that you can have visibility, so we can show you the decisions that we've made.
Well, that's fair enough, providing you talk about, in reality, the communities of Chapel St Mary and Alsett Heath, and tell me why you want to move a line that's 200 to 500 metres away from their properties, where I'm giving you a solution to move the line further west, at least 1,000 plus yards away from their homes, and in what you call this, it's not cut and cover, but it's false cut and cover. That's what you indicate earlier. And if you could do that, I think you might win some friends. And it's far better to win some friends rather than have this hostility all the time. And I would appeal to you just to think about why you want to move a line that's 200 to 500 metres away from residential properties, when you have the opportunity now to move it at least 1,000 plus, and it's only a line in the middle of a field, and you can do it. And that's what I'm really asking for, is due consideration, because if you don't, there will be a backlash from the community, and they'll line up and block your scheme. And you might say, oh, well, we're putting our application in, and then it might go on for years. It might never happen. Far better to listen now rather than say, put your head in the sand and say, no, we're not going to listen. We'll tell you reasons why we're going to do it. But at the end of the day, if you want to win friends, you need to move it further west, at least 1,000 plus yards away from residential properties. And in this day and age, I do not think that's unreasonable request, and it's within Highways England's dimensions. It's only a line. We're still talking about a line on a map. Nothing is in concrete. You can do it if you want to do it, and you want to bring communities on board. If you don't want to do it, you suffer the consequences. And you will have consequences, and your scheme will be blocked up for a long, long time.
Okay, that's noted, Councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Spillman.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. We're living in an era of a biodiversity crisis. This doesn't just affect Thurrock. The UK is in the grip of, an unprecedented crisis at any point in history. And what I want to know is, firstly, how Highways England are going to measure the impact of the crossing on biodiversity. Obviously, there's going to be, we're talking about millions of individual, plants, insects, animals that we'll lose as a result of this crossing. What sort of mitigation is usual for a scheme like this to, hopefully, it would be good if we could see a net positive impact on biodiversity through mitigation. Is that possible? And what are the sort of projects or ideas that you've got to make that possible?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor. In terms of the impact and how we assess the impact on biodiversity, obviously we'll be reporting the impact in biodiversity in the environmental statement, in the chapters there, and obviously we follow the Highways England and Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, the guidance in terms of how you make that assessment. So there's a raft of surveys done to understand what the current situation is, both desktop and physical surveys. There's then the assessment of what the scheme the impact is having on the flora, fauna, and ecological elements, and then obviously we mitigate that, and the mitigation is set out in our environmental master plan in terms of where the various species will be translocated to, where planting will be put in place, and the overall impact that'll have in terms of whether it's a net positive impact in terms of biodiversity. That's always, we haven't, and I will say we haven't finished our calculation on that yet. We're working through it as we get to nearing the completion of our environmental statement. But a scheme, a scheme of this nature, that is a new road, new build, is difficult to get a positive biodiversity gain on site without seeking off-site, what they call off-site credits, which is obviously investing, as you probably know, investing in other biodiversity areas. But we're currently working through that. We don't know whether we're in that position yet, but certainly that's it would be a challenge.
Is it a challenge that you can meet though, realistically? I mean, because just like Councillor Rice had said that you could win friends with the points he's making. You could also win friends by committing to a net positive impact on biodiversity within Thurrock. Is it something that you think is realistic? And given Anna's concerns about raising expectations of councillors, I would appreciate some candour if that's possible.
Yeah, I'll and hopefully I'd like to think if nothing I am open and honest in these sessions. That's something I'm going to have to take away. Like I've said, I know we're working through the detail, and I know it's proven to be a challenge. I currently don't know where we are in terms of where that calculation is, or in terms of what we're currently reporting on in the S. So I'll go away, and what I can share with you outside this forum, I'll share with everybody on this call. But I don't lead the environmental statement, and so I don't know the absolute detail of that.
Chair, if I can just come in there. So development consent orders and the Planning Act 2008 isn't captured by the new Environment Bill, Councillor Spillman, which provides and requires a positive gain on biodiversity. So this scheme falls out with the emerging new environment bill. So it's clear, it's important to mention that. The second thing is that Highways England only have to mitigate significant environmental effects. So they don't have to mitigate any environmental effect, only environmental effect that's deemed to be significant. So on that basis, it comes back to what we've talked about before, which is the do minimum, not do best, or not even do middle, if you like. It is do minimum principle.
Would you say, Gareth, that when it comes to biodiversity, you're going to be doing the minimum, or you're going to be doing the best?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Like any scheme of this nature, you've got to balance the environmental impact and what gain you can put to there against the benefit cost ratio of the scheme. So anything that we do, we need to balance up the commercial position against the environmental position. And in truth, I don't know where we are in terms of whether there's a positive impact. I don't genuinely. It would be wrong of me to say so. In terms of whether we're going to possibly do the best, we're going to do the best that we can. We're looking to get as much gain as we can within reason. But similarly, the difficulty is in terms of taking land for mitigation over and above what's legally required. That's a difficult position to support. So it's a fine balance. So are we looking to do the best we can? Yes, we are. But it's within the constraints of the framework we have to do that.
It's also within the constraints of the finances available, and actually it's not out with the council's powers to acquire land for the benefit of residents in terms of proper planning, environmental well-being and social well-being of the area. So there's an opportunity, isn't there, for something to come about as a consequence of that. It's just a question of whether Highways England's prepared to do it.
Thank you for your answer, Gareth. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
A question from myself. There's quite a few large projects that are either submitting DCOs or had consultations recently, like the resort in Kent on the Swanscombe Peninsula, and you've got Bradwell, the Bradwell 2, the new proposed nuclear power station out on the coast there. Is there a danger, or have you got any plans in place? Because this is quite a wide net, but construction workers, if all three projects get all big in their own right, get the go-ahead, is there enough construction workers in this area to fulfil all those projects, including the Lower Thames crossing?
It's certainly a risk that we've recognised for some time, in terms of if you have, because as you said, if there could be a number of major schemes that are working or being constructed at the same time. Now, ideally, you'd look to draw as much local labour as you can into those schemes. But similarly, if there's a saturation of those schemes, then there's only so much local labour you can use there. So we've been working closely with the SMEs so that they can be aligned to this scheme. We can make them aware of what the opportunities there are, so that when the main work contractors come on board, those relationships are already in place, so we can maximise the likelihood of the local gain for the local community. But again, to be clear, it would be amiss of me to say that if you have a huge amount of construction work going on at the same time, then labour and labour could be an issue, and it may be that you would have to bring in some more external resource to satisfy the needs for maybe this scheme or for other schemes. But it's certainly a risk that we've identified, because we're aware that the government seems minded to use construction to stimulate growth post-COVID, and so again that has benefits, but it also has risks in terms of the availability of workforce. But again, if you know, we're looking to work, you know, the not in education and employment and training, apprenticeships. It's a good opportunity. You know, if the scheme gets through the examination, if the minister's minded to support the scheme and to make the DCO order, then it is an excellent opportunity for local apprenticeships and for local SMEs.
Thank you for that. Just to follow up on that point. So if there is an influx of construction workers, I've looked at things like Hinckley and read reports coming out of there where there's a large number of people all move towards where the work is and the project is, and that brings its own challenges. We already, even though we are passing in planning as a council lots of new residence homes and things like that and new properties, we're still nowhere near going to have enough. So with this influx of people coming in, bringing their own problems, will these workers, how will you as a considerate developer, so to speak, ensure that residents are not impacted by having an influx of people that may be living in temporary accommodation or houses of multiple occupancy? How will you help mitigate those issues for our residents?
Certainly, we would have assessed or have assessed and are assessing the location of the main works compounds, how the construction workforce is going to get to those compounds as part of our traffic model. So that's the sort of base and background. Then that's communicated through the Code of Construction Code of Construction's plan, which gives the contractor or forces the contractor to further develop their plans based on what we put forward, bearing in mind that obviously it can't be environmentally different than from what we've proposed during the DCO. So we've assessed where the main construction works are. We've assessed how we're going to get the people to and from the site, and also, you know, for the tunnel, there'll be 24-hour working, and so people will be staying on site there. So there'll be some, you know, a number that'll be on site in the sort of in the caravan type situation, mobile home situation. We've assessed that. And like I said, when the contractors come on, they need to take the work that we've done and develop it in detail, both their construction planning and the traffic management plans that go with that.
Chair, can I just come in there, please? There's a couple of points to make. One, the council is not supportive of mobile homes turning up across the borough. Absolutely not. We do know that there'll be a requirement for some worker accommodation on site 24 hours, 7 days a week because of the tunnel boring. We disagree fundamentally with the summary document of the housing strategy that LTC has produced. We've not seen the full document, we've only seen the summary document, but we've got severe concerns in terms of the impact on our own emergency housing needs for homeless people across the borough. Also, we have raised the issue about green travel. We've talked about the use of Stamford-le-Hope and the new transport hub that will be in operation by 2024. And we've talked to Highways England about making that the central hub for transporting workers who travel by public transport, both from London and from the Southend area, down to site, because we'll be providing a dedicated bus waiting and turnaround facility in that location. We've talked about that several times with Highways England, but there's been no take-up. So the whole strategy for how workers are going to get to site and how they're going to be accommodated is still a matter of dispute between us.
Okay, thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you, Chair. Just a matter arising from, obviously you gave us a summary of the supplementary consultation issues that arose. And obviously remembering the council's sort of very thorough response to that supplementary consultation, there were concerns pretty much across the board about more modelling needing to be done in terms of air pollution and noise. So this is in reference, you've spoken tonight about the mitigation, the noise mitigation barriers, and that obviously that modelling forms the basis of you knowing whether they are going to be effective or not. So my question is, are Highways England, do they accept the council's position at supplementary consultation that more modelling was needed in terms of noise pollution, but also air pollution? And is that going on at the moment, or is there any update that you can give us on that, please?
Yeah, certainly. In truth, I don't know the absolute detail of what the concerns were around the issues raised around our air quality and noise model. But I can give you an update in terms of where we are with our air quality and noise modelling. And if Anna then can come back with anything that I've missed out, I'll do my best to pick that up. So in terms of the status of our air quality and noise models, yes, they have continued to be developed, and certainly at the supplementary consultation, we hadn't developed our noise model because we didn't show the noise barriers. We only completed that quite recently this year. And that's included this reason why the noise barriers are shown on the design refinement consultation. And that model has been created by, firstly, we create a traffic model, and then we create a sort of network. Now, the traffic model is and this is my opinion, when you compare traffic models that we develop now to how they used to be developed sort of 5 or 6 years ago, we now develop our traffic models using mobile phone data. They used to be done on a very limited postcard and survey information. So you had a far smaller set of data that you were developing that model from. The fact that we now use mobile phone data means that our traffic model, the basis of it is far more robust than they used to be. So that's the basis. And the reason why I brought that in is because we use the traffic flows in terms of the air quality and in terms of noise. So base traffic model we believe to be robust and thorough. And then we then followed what we call the web tag guidance in terms of the air quality. And again, we model the air quality using appropriate software based on the traffic flows and based on the sort of landform, and again report that in the environmental statement. So we haven't completed these chapters yet. They're still working through the approval process. They're still going through the necessary checks and cross references as we speak. So we haven't shared that, but I can say that when we do publish our environmental statement, we'll be content that what we're reporting on in terms of the methods that we followed to develop our traffic model and the methods we followed to determine and report on the air quality and noise will be absolutely in accordance with government guidelines.
Okay, maybe Anna can come in on this one as well, but I seem to remember, I'm stretching my memory now, but I seem to remember we have had previous discussions about the traffic modelling data needing to be updated, and was that updated? I think Anna will probably be able to answer that.
Councillor Muldowney, the traffic modelling has been updated, and the Cordon model has been shared with the technical team acting on behalf of the council. There's still quite a significant amount of work to be done, to be fair. I know that members across the borough have concerns about air quality, but actually air quality in terms of this scheme, whilst air quality will deteriorate in some areas because there's no road at the moment in those locations, it won't deteriorate beyond acceptable limits. So the air quality issue is less of a concern for me on the new road, if I'm being brutally honest. That I am concerned about noise, because noise does have an impact. It's the question that comes about in terms of model versus reality. So for me, Highways England can go through a robust exercise in terms of the modelling for both air quality and noise, but actually there's no substitute for the real thing. And so for me, it's about what measures are going to be put in place to measure and monitor air quality and noise once the road is open. Because for me, that's a key consideration. There's no substitute for the reality, if you like. That's something that I'm really quite concerned about. And as we know, modelling isn't a precise science, but that's a matter for me to pursue with Highways England through the examination process to try and secure a level of monitoring, if you like, once the road is open. But I have to say that, let's think in real terms. We're in 2020 now. The road will be open in 2027, 2028. I would expect by that time that the year of opening would be the worst in terms of air quality and noise, simply because at that point, most people will be moving across to some form of electric vehicles. So in terms of what Highways England's position on that is, I think they're actually right, that there is going to be a gradual move across to more green vehicles, if you like, and use of the roads that way. Where the issue is still maybe of concern is in relation to HGVs and unitised vehicles in the borough. And because the fact we have 3 international ports using unitised vehicles to transport containers about, that is clearly of concern for us.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Thanks, Councillor.
Councillor Spillman, did you wish to speak?
Yes, please. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Councillor, thank you.
I've read quite a lot recently where there's a lot of people suggesting that we've reached peak car in terms of the amount of journeys people are taking, and that's been sped up by the COVID crisis. Have Highways England got a view on that? Do Highways England think we've reached peak car, and how could that influence the scheme?
I'll be honest with you. Currently, and again, I'll go away and check. I'm no traffic modeller, but I'm 99% sure that our traffic model doesn't take any regard of COVID, or the impact that's going to have, whether it is going to have a long-term impact. Quite clearly, there's been a huge impact in terms of journeys since March. And there's no disputing that. There's been a massive reduction in the number of users. In terms of what that means for the long term, that's something that certainly we haven't currently considered in terms of the impact of COVID in the long term, and it's something that we'll probably need to cover off, because, as you said, there's going to be questions around it.
Considering the constraints over the process, and at some point in the near future, things are going to be almost set in stone. How much time have you got to consider the effects of COVID in terms of the process, and how much time have you got to make changes if the effects of COVID show that they've got a fundamental change to the modelling that you've used?
Certainly, in terms of fundamental changes to the scheme, once we've published the DCO application, then any change would need to go through a relevant sort of submitting a change process in terms of whether it's a materially different change. I was thinking in terms of a position, certainly we would need, and Highways England would need to produce a statement around COVID and the impact that COVID has had on that. And it's going to be a point of clarification through representations during the examination, I would have thought. And it'll be part, I was going to say, and that will be part of what the examining authority will need to consider.
Yeah, I mean, from an anecdotal point of view, as someone that travels over the bridge through the tunnel every working day, It's still, I mean, it is considerably busier than it has been early on during the lockdown. And I think it would be interesting for us to have a clearer idea of the cost benefit of the scheme for that to be fully considered. But I thank you for your answer.
No, absolutely, because since even if there was, I'm no medical practitioner clearly, but if there's a vaccine that comes out, then clearly things will go back to normal a lot quicker than if things take a year or two. But certainly it's something that we'll be advising Highways England that we need to pull a statement together in terms of what we believe the impact of COVID is.
Yep, thank you very much, Gareth.
Thank you, Councillor.
Back in the chamber now, Robert Quick.
Hi, Gareth. Based on what you just said earlier about the move to modern technology to monitor air quality and noise, why are you then sticking with old technology, reflective noise barriers, instead of moving to new technology, absorbing noise barriers?
In truth, it tends to be reflective, because when you use things like earth buns, they tend to reflect sound rather than absorb it. So it does give you the option to replace barriers with earth buns, and certainly in some locations, that's when you get into the detailed design, that's a more appropriate solution. And a more aesthetically pleasing solution, and also reduces the amount of fill that goes off-site. So certainly it gives us the opportunity to use both.
Okay, thanks for that answer. One other question on a separate topic. At the last meeting we had with you, you mentioned that the scheme would benefit Thurrock as the benefit cost ratio proved this. What is the benefit cost ratio, and how does it prove that it's a benefit for Thurrock, this scheme?
What we'll be in a position to do, not at this moment in time, but we're getting pretty close to it, is reporting the benefits. Certainly at a council level, but I'm led to believe even at a ward level, we'll be producing what the benefits are to the scheme, and we'll be reporting upon that. So again, apologies, I'm not able to go into detail at this moment in time. I could tell you, the sort of what my perception in terms of the local benefit is during construction, in terms of the injection of capital into an area, and the opportunities that gives SMEs. And the employment, and obviously then there's the wider benefit the scheme brings in terms of the economic benefits to the region by having this new connection and removing the sort of the Dartmouth crossing problem that exists. So I can answer at that high level, but really I think what you'd probably be interested in is the actual benefits that we'll be reporting at a ward level when we publish our environmental statement.
Okay, thanks. I don't entirely agree with your assessment there, but thanks for the answer anyway.
Okay, thank you.
On Teams, Laura Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Gareth, just following on a little bit, there's a higher level you were able to sort of speak about things. Can you tell me what the current predicted figure is for the economic schemes? The last figure I can find in documents was around 8 billion, and considering we're now up to 8.2 billion in cost, I just wondered what the current prediction was on the economic benefits.
Sorry, Laura, you broke up a bit then. I didn't pick that up. Was it just me, or did anybody else pick it up? I missed the question. Sorry.
No, everybody picked up the break.
I can repeat that. I'm quite happy to do that, obviously. I was just saying, could you please tell me if there is a current prediction on the figure of the economic benefits of the scheme, when you consider that the last figure that I can find in any documents is around an £8 billion economic benefit, and the current cost obviously is now at 8.2 billion. Could you please tell me what the current prediction is for the figure of the economic benefit of the scheme?
At this moment in time, I'm not able to share anything more than what's in the public domain. We're completing our exercise. Clearly, we will be reporting what the benefit cost ratio is of the scheme, and that'll include the current cost estimate and obviously the benefits against that. So can I give you anything more than currently what's in the public domain? No, but we're getting very near to completing that work, and we will need to report that as part of our economic assessment report.
Okay, thank you. And just as on a different topic, can you tell me, is there any other information you can give us about the viaduct across the Mardyke? Because obviously we haven't really seen any visual design or anything on that. And, what can we expect when you put the DCO application in with regards to that viaduct?
Certainly, I think, didn't we share an image in Decon? Wasn't there a typical image in the design refinement consultation for Mardyke? I think there was, actually, in terms of the change. There
was, Gareth, but it was a complete turnaround from what had been proposed and discussed at previous design council meetings in terms of the viaduct, because originally what was consulted on was quite a short funded viaduct. Then after the design council meeting, what was proposed was a longer, elegant, higher structure, and then now we've reverted back to the original design or something similar, and there's been no written justification for it.
Okay, in terms
it's also
of...
very difficult to judge the height, Gareth. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. It's very difficult for us to judge the height when you've got people using that area across the Mardyke for walking, cycling, horse riding. It's very difficult to judge from what we've been provided exactly what to expect.
Okay, I don't know the particulars in terms of the proposed change from the supplementary consultation to the design refinement consultation. You're right, Anna. It has gone from, the design council has gone from a longer single structure to a structure that's now two separate structures with an earthwork embankment between the two. In terms of the height, I couldn't give it a precise height. Obviously, it's at a height where any use that it currently has will be continued. And in terms of what provision underneath in terms of cycling, NMUs, as I call them, certainly the headroom will be sufficient to accommodate that. So is it your concern that it's going to be low, or is your concern that is it something else, or?
I think it's really the unknown, which is the case with a lot of aspects of this scheme. We don't feel like we've been given enough information, particularly about knowing things about the visual. It's very difficult for us to visualise it. I know that when I've spoken with Gary previously, he said that when he's looking at things, he can work it out. And obviously you guys are all very technical and deal with this on a day in, day out basis. For the public, it's not as easy for us to visually be able to actually get our heads around what exactly we are going to get with this scheme. And things like the viaducts over the Mardyke and the railway line, they're things that we still feel that we don't really understand and know. We don't know what to expect. We can't picture it in our heads, and you haven't given us enough visual representation of aspects like this.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. I was going to say we certainly have reported, got an image in the design refinement consultation. But Gary, do you want to go into a bit more detail?
All I was going to do was come in there and say that the level of the road through there is about 11.5 meters, and the ground level is around about 3.5. So you've got an 8 meter sort of height above the actual existing ground, and if you take then the deck depth, you've got clear, obviously, for equestrians going underneath it, and so it will be clear through it. Although I can't remember actually whether it's actually I think it has come down slightly, but there are. I'm not sure what it would be marginal if it's changed. The thing is, what's happened is we've got 2 viaducts now rather than just a single viaduct, and one of them's been made bigger, and the other one's been made slightly shorter. Overall, I think it's about a 50-metre increase on the viaducts with the embankment in between. But there's in the engineering books, which is Map Book 3, I know they're exaggerated scale, but if you go to sheet 15, it does give you the levels, if that's any help, but it doesn't give you sort of an image of what it will look like, because, as I say, this is exaggerated scale, so you've got to remember it's a 1 in 10, but it's the only way to actually show alignment. So it's a useful one to look at. And then if you look at the image that's within the decon, that gives you a sort of a more of a view of what it will look like. I hope that helps.
It's still very difficult. I know it comes naturally to you. I think it's very difficult for us as the public to come to terms with exactly what to expect. And Anna mentioned there about the fact that there had been a change at these meetings. Can you tell us why you have gone for a lower one rather than the one that the design originally, when the council were involved, you were discussing?
It's like anything as the scheme develops. You have commercial pressures in terms of looking for what's the best scheme that you can have within budgetary constraints, and generally an embankment is cheaper to construct than a structure.
Does that not also impact the flooding, considering it is across the fens? If you've got that kind of
any flooding would need to be, and the impact upon flooding would need to be considered, and land taken, and that's considered again in terms of the overall benefit, in terms of what option we went forward with. So has the flooding been considered? Yes. Has the flooding been considered with our current scheme? Yes, it has. And we still think that the scheme that we have at this particular location is the most appropriate.
Thank you.
Councillor Spillman.
Hello there. There's been quite a lot of questions about the mitigation of noise and the barriers, but for the layperson, say we're talking about those poor residents in Chapel St Mary, Councillor Rice's residents, how noisy would the road be without for these people in their gardens? How noisy is that road going to be without the noise reduction, and what's the sort of percentage reduction that the mitigation is going to achieve?
Yeah, we have that information, but I don't know that information. You know, we have, as you rightly say, you know, there's a large number of properties that are affected right across the scheme. We will be reporting upon that in our environmental statement, but I couldn't give you exact details in terms of percentage increases. But certainly each property will be reported upon in terms of what the noise is currently without the scheme, what it is with the scheme and mitigated, and what it is with the mitigation in place. So again,
when will that be reported?
It'll be reported in our environmental statement. That obviously subject to if and when we submit our DSO application, and that's accepted by PINS, then that information will be available shortly after that.
Have you got any sort of general guidance at the moment about what level of noise is acceptable in these sort of schemes?
Yes, I haven't got it off the top of my head, but certainly we follow a well-defined process in terms of what's a perceptible noise increase, what needs to be provided in terms of mitigation around increase in noise levels, which is obviously measured in decibels. So I don't have the absolute detail there, but I do know that as I said, each property is reviewed and reported upon, and if mitigation is put in place, and still where there is an increase, and I'm not going to say there won't be an increase in noise, even with the mitigation in place, because again, that wouldn't be correct. The increase in noise is reported upon in the environmental statement for those properties that will be subject to an increase in noise.
Just to check it, is Highways England going to be doing their best or the bare minimum when it comes to noise reduction?
Certainly, we provided noise barriers and noise bunds and false cuttings, which does have a, you look at the amount of false cutting that we have on this scheme, it is quite significant and goes far beyond what we would normally provide. So I think, in my personal view, I think there's been a massive effort in terms of minimising the impact. But again, there are, I'm not going to sit here and say, there's not going to be properties affected, because there will be. And a scheme of this nature is likely to be a large number of properties.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Gareth.
Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to what we were saying about apprenticeships and SMEs and the potential benefit, I mean, this is probably one area that when I've been to consultation meetings and spoken to staff, thought that there could possibly be quite a big benefit for the area. So I wanted to just get an update on that. Obviously, we're in a position with COVID where we've already got about 12% youth unemployment, for example, in the area, and COVID looks like that's going to make that even worse. And the young people are likely to get worse hit than older people, although hopefully we're going to find some benefit in employment across the age range. So can you tell us, is there any update with what's happening with progressing apprenticeships or getting small and medium enterprises involved, or any kind of training college that's been mooted in the past? What's the situation?
Yeah, certainly. I probably won't do this justice, but there's been a huge amount of work done in terms of meeting local employees and SMEs and trying to make them aware of what the opportunities are and how to prepare for those opportunities. And we're using, and I should be able to remember, it's the same sort of IT model that was used for the Olympics that the SMEs found worked particularly well in terms of getting connection between those and the main works contractors. And in terms of the apprenticeships, there's a 5% government target in terms of the number of apprenticeships. We're looking to better that, and we're currently reviewing the construction contract documents to see what that figure will be in terms of bettering that 5% apprenticeship target. Because as you say, if, and it's a big, huge if the scheme goes ahead. It's got significant obstacles to overcome. But if the scheme does go ahead, then in terms of benefits for employment and training and youth opportunities through apprenticeships, it is, as you say, an opportunity in that respect.
Well, I'd really welcome any updates on that once you've gone through the process of reviewing that, especially in regards to the 5% government target and how you hope to exceed that. I know you're saying that the scheme's got a lot of hurdles to go through now. What do you see the hurdles are that the scheme still has to overcome?
I think probably Anna would be better placed, but genuinely, we have a scheme that by its nature is complex, by its location impacts on some significant environmental sites, by its location is not fully supported by some key authorities. So whilst the scheme has huge benefits, and you know this, you'll know this better than me. There's also, it's like any scheme of this nature. It has huge benefits, but it also has significant impacts that need to be weighed up. And schemes of this size and nature have gone to planning before and not progressed. So this. So, like I said, this isn't a done deal, and despite what Anna may think my role is on this job, we're not here to just promote the scheme. If somebody comes up with something which is an improvement on the scheme that we've put forward, then we will need to respond to that in the examination phase. And in an open and honest and transparent way, as engineering and environmental experts that we are. So it's an open public forum. It's effectively the last public test of the overall business case. Leaving aside some of the ministerial improvements beyond that. So there are some huge obstacles, and as I said, it's a complex scheme. It's a pretty controversial scheme, and it has environmental impacts. So there's a lot of questions that will be asked of the scheme, and is obviously we need to provide appropriate, honest, and open responses so that the examining authority can pull their report together, and then the minister can make their mind up based on the information that's put in front of them.
Well, that's very reassuring to hear that there's hope that the scheme may not go ahead.
No, and this is my issue here, Gareth, because you're raising false expectation here. 98.9% of schemes have secured consent where they're policy compliant. There's a presumption in favour of development where a scheme is policy compliant. So are you saying that your scheme isn't policy compliant, and that's where the element of doubt comes into play?
Not at all, Anna. And I'm not saying that. What I am saying, no. If you've answered the question, please give me the courtesy of answering it. What I am saying is there's been enough historical evidence of major schemes. I could give you the example, admittedly, not in England, but certainly the M4 corridor around Newport. A scheme that didn't go. A scheme that didn't go DCO. That the planning inspectorate found in favour of the scheme, but the minister decided not to proceed with it. So there are definitely examples of schemes, major schemes of a similar length and complexity that have not gone forward.
So let's just put that into context then. So you said the minister made a decision not to progress the scheme. In this scenario, we've got a government reviewing planning legislation. We've got a government that's supporting build, build, build. That's the words of the Prime Minister in an announcement, build, build, build. We've got Highways England and the DfT announcing £24.9 billion worth of investment on road schemes in the UK, and also identifying the LTC as a flagship scheme. So please, I have to say this to you because I'm really concerned you're raising expectations and not managing the expectations effectively of my members, because I'm saying the converse of what you're saying, that there's a presumption in favour of a policy compliant scheme. We've got an adopted national planning policy statement on national networks that supports the scheme and even identifies the need for a second river crossing. So you've got to be really careful about what you say to my members, because you are raising their expectations that they can challenge this scheme to the extent that it wouldn't go ahead. And I think you're raising false expectation, actually, in terms of where we are with government policy and the support for this scheme currently. It's identified as a flagship scheme. Let's be clear about that. The government has identified the funding for the scheme. So you've got to be really careful about what you say to my members.
Okay,
No, Gareth, listen to me. Because for every comment you make, I've got to provide the realistic statement to my members so they understand the true extent of it. So please, I'm imploring you, please do not give them false hope.
Anna, just sort of interest, was there anything that I said was incorrect?
Yes.
No. Actually, it's a yes or no answer. No. What do you believe was incorrect in what I said in terms of that process?
throughout this evening, you have provided...
No. That last question, excuse me, you made a particular point. Now, on that last point, was there anything that I said that was factually incorrect? Because if it was, please correct me and I'll apologise.
To be honest, you said quite a lot, but I disagreed with fundamentally... Disagreeing is fine. I accept we disagree, but to suggest I've misled and lied is inappropriate. I did not. And the fact that you can't point to one point element... A minute, Gareth.
Sorry. Can you both just speak one at a time, please?
Because I didn't.
Okay, thank you. I'll accept that. Okay, thank you.
Can I say something? I mean, I have to say that listening to what you were saying, what you may have said is factually correct, but I was given the impression from what you were saying that we'd still have we'd have a good chance of being able to stop the scheme. So regardless of the fact of that you've put it in a way that is not telling any untruths, let's say, the impression that you are giving is that we've got a good chance of stopping the scheme. So I think I have to go with what Anna's saying. I'd rather you just be honest at this point and
again, apologies.
Tell it how it is.
Apologies if you think I've come across as dishonest or misleading. That isn't the case. Councillor, you asked me a question and I gave an answer that I believe to be very accurate and true. And there's certainly the risks that I see as the main risks to this project. Obviously, Anna doesn't see it. She thinks, the case and the scheme is likely to proceed whenever. I still see this as an open public forum that we need to go through due process with.
Well, you need to go through due process. I'll give you that. But given the statistics, Gareth, and the likely prospects of success, it's not looking good for the council. 98.9% success rate on DCOs that are policy compliant. You've got to accept the figures. And please do not mislead my members, because it's taken me a long time to set out the stark reality of this scheme. And we will participate in the examination. Of course we will. And we will fight the residents' corner, because that's what we're required to do. And that's what's the appropriate thing to do to strike that public balance. But please do not mislead my members on giving them that glimmer of hope that they can stop this scheme, because the statistics are stacked against us. The schemes that have failed, let's be clear about those. It was one of my schemes, which was the carbon capture and storage scheme for National Grid that I promoted. And the scheme didn't fail on the examination per se. It failed because the need case went away. So as long as your need case is there, you've got a strong prospect of success on this scheme. And we need to manage expectations.
Okay, thank you, Anna.
I guess no further questions on Teams or in the chamber. Has anyone got anything they'd like to sum up at the end before we let the guys from Highways England go? No? Thank you very much for your time this evening, gentlemen, and taking our questions. It is appreciated that we've got this way of directly conversing and getting the answers. On the few points where you're going to come back to us, could you feed back to the task force on those? I think there's about 3 or 4 points you said you'd come back to us on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll share what we thought we'll need to come back to you on and share those. And if anybody wants to add anything or thinks we've omitted anything, please come back to us and we'll certainly come back to you on those points.
So if you can come back, Gareth, through me and Lucy Tricker, and then Lucy will disperse the information if that's okay, so we can follow some form of formality.
Yeah, that's fine. Be delighted to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on the agenda, Councillor Fraser?
You are naughty, aren't you, Eastgate? You really are.
I'm really concerned that they're just gilding the lily. Seriously.
Oh dear.
What are you saying, oh dear, for? Tell me.
Oh, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Thank you for that. Yes, there are other points on the agenda, so I'm going to get through them as quickly as possible because time is ticking. Agenda point 6, the task force priorities list, found on pages 15 to 34. If you can, hopefully you've all looked at these already. If you want to have a quick look now, I'm going to just pause for 30 seconds and ask if there's any questions from members on the task force priority list.
That, Councillor Massey, if I can just explain, that's probably going to be superseded by the mitigation list that we're going to come back to you next month with. That's probably the reality of it, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of items on that list that just need to be scrapped off of it.
Indeed, yeah, I think there's quite a lot that's, like you say, that will be updated, so it might be more beneficial of time to go through that on the next meeting.
And I think what we need to do is come up with a list of priorities, Councillor Massey, so that we can, like I said, we're not going to be able to fight the examination on all fronts, because if we do that, we're diluting our effect, if you like. We need to prioritise the key items that we want to pursue. And if we do that, we've got a greater chance of success on those big ticket items. And actually, where I think we get to is there are organisations around us, businesses and community organisations that we will work closely with during the examination phase to exchange information. So there'll be things about the scheme that Laura and the action group are better faced to challenge rather than the council, but we'll provide information and support to her to do that. So I think that's kind of where we get to. But like I said, we need to identify those top key dozen or so priorities that we need to focus on.
And it's confirmed we'll have those for the next meeting, is it?
It will, hopefully, yes. That's what I'm working to, and an update on health impact assessment. So the work plan probably needs to be updated to reflect that, but I'm jumping ahead on the agenda, I think.
I appreciate your hard work on that, and also the health impact assessment. I think would be really good to hear as well at the next meeting. Anyone else have anything to say on priorities? Okay, moving on to final agenda item number 7, the work programme. The work programme is included at page 35 and 36 of the agenda. Does any member have any further items they would like added?
Councillor Massey, can I just come in there? So I alluded before to the fact that officers might not have a huge amount of time in November. So if Highways England are intending to submit the DCO on the 23rd of October, that's the date that they have shared with us at the moment. And so we are going to be heads down, focused on reviewing the application documents from that date. I think we need to play November's task force by ear, because I don't want to just attend a task force when we're halfway through that review process and it's not complete, or we are really in the thick of it. So I think maybe in October's task force, when we come back with the health impact work and the economic impact work, I think it might be an opportunity for me to outline process so members understand what the next steps are, what the time limits are, for them registering as interested parties in the examination process, and what those next steps are and what the likely timetable is going to be. Because if we need to vacate November's task force because of work constraints, then there's an opportunity in December to come back with a kind of summary, hopefully, of where we're at and what we think we are aiming for, if that makes sense. So I'm just kind of trying to manage expectations, because I don't want everybody to think in October, the application's in, we need to be doing something. If we manage those expectations effectively, I'm not going to let anybody miss deadlines, don't worry about that. but I'm just trying to think about how I'm going to manage and coordinate the workload my end, if that makes sense, being a little bit selfish.
Yeah, it does make sense. I see some agreement in the chamber as well. Yeah, I mean, we'll have those conversations. I mean, obviously, the DCO has already been delayed massively than what High England would like. So we'll see if they stick to the 23rd of October and play it by ear, as they say.
This is the first time they've pinned their colours to the mast so certainly, though. So let's see what happens. But I think the general view from the consultant team and myself is that it's a little bit premature, frankly.
I think that a lot of the things have been ambitious date-wise, so we'll see. We'll wait and see on the 23rd if it does happen. And with that, don't think we've covered all the item agendas. Everyone's had a chance to raise questions. That concludes the business of the meeting this evening. I now declare the meeting closed at 19:56. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Fraser.
Thank you, Fraser.